She raised the paddle herself. I had never seen her do it, not once in 4 months. And the whole room felt the wrongness of it before anyone understood what they were looking at. 200 people sat under the chandeliers of Reyne Vass, the oldest auction house in the city, and not one of them had ever spent a second looking at the woman who was now on her feet. Her name was Octavia Reyne. I had spent those 4 months certain she was a cataloguer, a quiet one, careful, the kind of woman who logs other people's treasures in a back room and then goes home to no one. Lot 114 was on the block. Lot 114 was my grandmother's entire life, about to be broken into pieces and sold off to a woman who bought ruined things for the pleasure of owning them. And then the cataloguer stood, and she looked at the auctioneer, and she said one word: noted. After that, nothing in my life belonged to me the way it had 10 seconds before.
Hi everyone! Thank you for staying with me. Subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Stay close, stay connected.
If you want to hear uncensored, too hot for YouTube stories, check out my Patreon in the description. Tell us where you are watching from and subscribe. I want to back up first. My name is Nell Rourke. I was 26 that spring, and I had a job that almost no one understands when I describe it at a party, which was fine because I did not go to parties. I was a provenance researcher. I traced the histories of objects, where a thing came from, whose hands it had passed through, what was true about it, and what someone had only wished were true. People think it is about money. It is not about money. It is about whether a thing is what it says it is. I had spent my whole life being careful about that question, and I had spent my whole life being careful in general. And the two facts are not unrelated. I came to Reyne Vass because my grandmother died. Agnes Rourke raised me. My parents were a story I had learned not to tell. And she was the entire rest of it, the whole structure of my childhood, the woman who taught me that you do not love a thing properly until you know exactly what it is. She kept a collection, not a grand one, not by the standards of the people who walk through the front doors of an auction house with a catalog under one arm. 80-some pieces, small bronzes, a few drawings, a cabinet of enamels she had spent 40 years assembling one careful purchase at a time, never buying what everyone wanted, always buying the overlooked thing, the honest thing, the piece that no one else had bothered to understand. The collection had a name in the trade. People called it the Rourke Cabinet. My grandmother hated that they called it that, and she was secretly pleased, and both of those were true at once, the way the best things about her were always two things at once. When she died, the debts came out of the walls. I will not bore you with the shape of them. There was a house with a loan against it that I had not known about. There was a long illness that insurance had decided, in the end, was mostly my problem. There were 40 years of buying overlooked things on a teacher's pension, which is a beautiful way to spend a life and a catastrophic way to leave one. By the time the lawyers were done arranging their faces into the expression lawyers use, there was only one asset large enough to matter. The collection had to be sold. The Rourke Cabinet had to be broken up and turned into a number, and the number had to be handed to people I would never meet, and that was simply the arithmetic of it. And there was no version of the arithmetic where I got to keep her. So I went to the oldest auction house in the city, and I asked them to sell the only thing I had left of the only person who had ever kept me. The first thing you should know about Reyne Vass is that it does not want you to feel comfortable. The building is 200 years old, and it has the manners of something that has outlived everyone who has ever rude to it. There is a great deal of marble. There is a staircase that makes a sound under your shoes that announces to the entire ground floor that someone uncertain has arrived. I climbed it on a Tuesday in March carrying a chipped enamel cup wrapped in a tea towel because I had not been able to make myself leave it in the empty house, and because some part of me had decided that if I was going to give them everything, I would at least keep the worst piece, the one that was worth nothing, the one Agnes drank her morning tea from for 30 years until the rim went the color of old ivory, and a hairline crack ran down one side like a thread someone had forgotten to pull. I did not expect anyone to notice the cup. She noticed the cup. I want to say something about how I met her, because I have gone over it many times since, And I still do not think I met her so much as I failed to see her, the way you fail to see a doorframe you have walked through 100 times. There was a woman at a long table in the cataloging room on the 3rd floor. She was perhaps in her late 30s, dark hair cut to the jaw with a single line of silver at one temple that she had clearly decided years ago she would never bother to hide. She wore a coat the color of charcoal that turned out, when she moved into the light from the tall windows, to be a very dark green, the green of a forest at the last minute before the light goes. She was logging objects. She had a brass fountain pen, an old one, and every few minutes she pressed her thumb against the cap of it, flat, deliberate, a small private motion, as if she were checking that the thing was still closed, or as if she were keeping count of something only she knew the rules of. She did not look up when I came in. She finished the line she was writing. Then she finished it again with her eyes, reading it back, and only then did she set the pen down and look at me, and the looking was so complete and so unhurried that I forgot for a moment why I had climbed the stairs. Reyne Vass introduced us. Marguerite was 71 and had been at the house longer than the marble had been clean, and she was the only person in the building who spoke to me as if I were a person rather than an estate. She said, "Nell, this is Octavia. She catalogs for us. She will take care of your grandmother's things." And the woman in the green that was charcoal inclined her head a half-inch and said the first word I ever heard her say, "Noted." I thought at the time that it was a cold thing to say. I want you to remember that I thought that. Here is the part I did not understand for a long time. I assumed Octavia Reyne was staff. I assumed it the way you assume the floor will hold you. She wore no jewelry except a thin steel band on her left wrist, the kind a clerk might wear. And she turned it slowly when she was thinking, around and around. And she ate her lunch alone at the long table, and she logged objects with a care that I, of all people, should have recognized as a kind of love. She was a cataloguer. The name on the building was Reyne. I did not put those two things in the same room in my head. People rarely do. We are not built to notice that the quietest person in the house is the one who owns the walls. Why am I telling you this now before I have told you anything else? Because everything that happened between us happened in that gap, in the space between what she was and what I was willing to see. She let me keep my mistake about her for 4 months. And I have asked myself many times whether that was a cruelty or a kindness. And the honest answer, the one I have made my peace with, is that it was neither. It was patience. She was waiting to find out if I would see her without being told. That is a particular kind of person, the kind who would rather be discovered than announced. I did not know yet that I was one of the things she had decided to be careful about. The sale was set for the 2nd week of June. 12 weeks away. 12 weeks to catalog 86 pieces, photograph them, write the descriptions, set the estimates, print the book, and let the Rourke Cabinet stop being my grandmother and start being lot 114. I told myself I would come in once, sign what needed signing, and stay away. I told myself a great many things that spring. I came back the next morning. I told myself it was to check a date on a bronze. It was not to check a date on a bronze. The 3rd week was when I started to understand that something was being done to my grandmother's collection, and that I could not tell yet whether it was a robbery or a rescue. Octavia cataloged the way other people pray. I would come in to check a date, which was a lie. I had stopped bothering to dress up, and I would find her at the long table with one of Agnes's bronzes under the lamp, turning it a 1/4 inch at a time, and she would be unwriting 40 years of other people's carelessness. A drawing my grandmother had bought as a copy, Octavia had quietly established was not a copy. A pair of enamels that the trade had always split between 2 workshops, she had put back together correctly, with 3 lines of reasoning and a mark on the underside that no one had thought to look for in 100 years. She was making the Rourke Cabinet more itself than it had ever been. She was finding the truth of every piece and writing it down in that unhurried hand. And the truth, in almost every case, was that my grandmother had been right, that the overlooked thing had been the honest thing all along. I did not understand why she was doing it. That is the question I kept circling. That 3rd week, the collection was going to be sold. Every hour Octavia spent restoring the real history of a bronze was an hour that made the bronze worth more to a stranger. Why would a cataloger pour that kind of attention into things that were about to leave the building forever and never come back? It made no sense as labor. It only made sense as something else, and I did not have a name yet for the something else, and I was afraid of the name. I asked her once, that week. I said, "Why are you doing all this? The pieces are leaving." She set the bronze down. She pressed her thumb to the cap of the brass pen, flat, the small private motion, and she looked at me for a moment longer than the question deserved. Then she said, "A thing should leave knowing what it was." I did not have an answer to that. I have spent 2 years failing to find a better sentence about my grandmother than the one a stranger said to me over a bronze in a cataloging room. Her scent was ink and cedar. I noticed it the way you notice that a room has been warm all along. She did not wear perfume. It was the ink she used and the cedar of the cabinet she kept her tools in. And under both of those, something that was only her. And I caught it the first time we stood close over the same object. And I want to be honest with you about the fact that I noticed it before I admitted to myself that I had noticed it. I was an omega. I had spent my whole adult life being careful about exactly that, about the way a scent can walk into a person before they have decided to let it. And I had built my whole composed, contained, careful self partly as a wall against precisely this. And I stood next to Octavia Reyne over a bronze, and the wall did absolutely nothing, and I told myself it was the cedar. It was not the cedar. Cressida Marlow came on a Thursday. I knew who she was before Marguerite told me, the way you know a weather front before the rain. She was an alpha, and she carried it the way some people carry money, loudly, as a thing meant to make other people calculate. She collected. That is the polite word. What she actually did was buy collections that grief had loosened from their owners, and break them, and sell the pieces apart for more than the whole had ever been worth. And the trade admired her for it because the trade admires anyone who is good at turning love into liquidity. She had already told the house, in writing, that she intended to acquire the Rourke Cabinet. Not a piece of it. All of it. And then, in the same letter, the part that made Marguerite's mouth go flat when she read it to me, she had laid out which pieces she would keep and which she would sell on and which she would simply let go. Because some of the enamels, she wrote, were sentimental rather than significant, and sentiment did not hold its value. Sentiment did not hold its value. She wrote that about my grandmother's life in a letter, on good paper. She came to see the collection in person that Thursday, and I was there, and I should not have been, and I will tell you exactly what happened, because it is the hinge that everything after it turns on. Cressida walked the long table the way a buyer walks anything, picking things up without asking, holding them to the light with the particular confidence of a person who has never once been told no. She got to the enamel cabinet, lot 114, my grandmother's 40 years. She opened it without looking at me, and she ran one finger along the inner shelf, and she said, to no one, to the room, that it would part out nicely, that the little ones always did, that there was a dealer in the north who would take the lesser panels by the dozen. I did not say anything. I want that on the record. I stood there with my grandmother's brass key in my pocket, the key to that exact cabinet, the one Agnes had pressed into my hand in the hospital, and folded my fingers over without a word, and I said nothing, because I had learned a long time ago that there is no profit in an omega telling an alpha like Cressida Marlow what a thing is worth. Octavia said it for me. She did not raise her voice. I have told you she never raised her voice, and that Thursday was the first time I understood that it was not shyness, it was a decision, the way a held breath is a decision. She was at the far end of the table, and she did not stop what she was doing, and she said, quietly, that lot 114 would not be parted out, that it had been catalogued as a single lot and would be sold as a single lot, and that the house would honor the collection's integrity. Cressida laughed. She looked at Octavia the way you look at a cataloger who has forgotten her station, and she said, "And who decides that?" And Octavia set down her pen, and she pressed her thumb once to the cap of it. And she looked up and she said, "I do." The room was very quiet. I did not understand what I had seen. I knew only that something had moved underneath the floor of the building. Some weight I had not known was there had shifted by an inch, and that Cressida Marlow, who had never been told no, had just been told no by a woman she believed was paid by the hour. Cressida's face did a complicated thing. She covered it quickly. She said something about seeing me at the sale, and she meant the cabinet when she said me, and she left. And her footsteps on the great staircase did not announce her the way mine always did, because the staircase, it turned out, was afraid of her too. I should have asked then. "Who are you?" I had the question in my mouth. Instead, I looked at Octavia, and she had already gone back to her cataloging, and the only sign that anything at all had happened was the thin steel band on her left wrist, which she was turning slowly around, and which I had come to understand she only touched when she was holding something very still inside herself. That night I could not sleep, which was not new, and I took out the brass key, which was because I had not let myself look at it since the hospital. It was nothing. A small brass key, dark with handling, the kind that opens exactly one thing in the world. It opened my grandmother's enamel cabinet, the cabinet that was now Lot 114, the cabinet that a woman who thought sentiment had no value intended to buy and break. Agnes had given it to me with her last clear strength, and she had not explained it. And I had spent the week since deciding it was just sentiment, just a key to a thing I was about to lose. And now I sat on the floor of an emptying house, and I turned it over and over the way Octavia turned the band on her wrist. And I thought about a stranger saying, "A thing should leave knowing what it was." I decided, on the floor, at 2 a.m, that I was going to do one thing before I let them sell my grandmother. I was going to make sure the Rourke Cabinet left knowing what it was. And I was going to make Octavia Reyne tell me why she cared, because I could no longer pretend I did not need the answer. I did not know yet that the answer was going to be me. I came in early the next morning, before the house was open, because I had decided things at 2 a.m, and I have learned that the only way to keep a 2 a.m. decision is to act on it before the daylight talks you out of it. She was already there. Of course she was already there. I have never, in all the time I knew her, arrived at a room before Octavia Reyne. She had a cup of tea beside her, and she had a second cup, and the second cup was my grandmother's, the chipped enamel one, the one I had carried up the great staircase wrapped in a tea towel and then left like a coward in the cataloging room because I could not carry it and the rest of my composure at the same time. She had washed it, she had filled it, she had set it at the place where I sat. I stood in the doorway and looked at my grandmother's cup, full of tea, waiting for me, and I could not speak for a moment, and Octavia did not look up. And that was the kindest thing she could have done, and I think she knew it. I sat down. I drank the tea. Then I said the thing I had come to say. I told her I had 3 conditions, and that I knew I had no right to any of them. The first was that the collection would leave honest. Every attribution true, every flaw recorded, nothing dressed up to flatter a buyer, and nothing hidden to protect a sale. The second was that Lot 114 would leave whole, the enamel cabinet sold as one thing, the way my grandmother had spent 40 years making it one thing, even if that meant a lower number, even if that meant Cressida Marlow got it intact instead of in pieces. And the third, I said, and here my voice did something I had not given it permission to do. The third is that you tell me why you care. Because you do. I have watched you. Catalogers do not do what you are doing. So whatever you are, I would like to know it before I lose the last thing I have to a room full of strangers. Octavia was quiet for a while. She turned the steel band on her wrist, once, around. Then she said, "You have the first 2. They were always yours. And the third one, you are going to have to earn the way everything true is earned, which is slowly and by paying attention." I said that was not an answer. She said, "No, It is a promise. They are different, and you of all people should know the difference. I want to tell you about the weeks after that, because the weeks after that are the real story. And if you are waiting for the part where something happens, I need you to understand that the something that happened was nothing, over and over with enormous care, until the nothing became the most important thing in my life. We did not touch. I want to be precise about that because it matters. For weeks, Octavia Reyne and I worked across a table from each other in a cataloging room in the oldest auction house in the city, and we did not touch. And the not touching was a held thing, a perimeter, a line that one of us could have stepped over at any moment and that neither of us stepped over. And the holding of that line did more to me than any crossing of it ever could have. Every morning the cup was at my place, washed and full. She never mentioned it. I never thanked her. To have named it would have been to make it smaller. And we both understood that, and so the cup simply appeared every morning, my grandmother's chipped cup full of tea, and it was the first language we had, and it said everything. By the second week of that arrangement, I had learned the grammar of her. I had learned that she pressed her thumb to the cap of the brass pen when she was deciding whether to say a thing, and that the press meant she had decided not to. I had learned that the steel band on her wrist turned clockwise when she was holding something still and counterclockwise, only once, very rarely, when something had gotten past her. I had learned that her coat was charcoal in the morning and dark green by 4 o'clock, when the light came low through the tall windows, and that she always sat where the 4 o'clock light would find her. And I had decided privately that this was the closest thing to vanity she allowed herself, and I was wrong about that too. But it was a nice thing to be wrong about. I had learned her economy. She never wasted a step. In a building full of people who bustled, who performed their own busyness, Octavia moved through a room as if she had already been everywhere in it and was simply revisiting. I used to watch her cross the cataloging floor and feel something in me go quiet, the way a room goes quiet when the right person finally walks into it. Why was she being kind to me? I asked myself that more times than I can count. And every answer I came up with was an answer about pity, about a grieving woman, and the staff who tolerated her. And every one of those answers was wrong. And I knew they were wrong. And I kept choosing them anyway. Because the right answer was standing across the table from me, turning a steel band on her wrist. And I was not yet brave enough to be loved by it. There was a girl named B. Conran, who portered for the house, 23, all elbows and honesty. The kind of young person who has not yet learned that you are supposed to pretend not to see things. She liked me for reasons I never established, and she had taken to lingering in the cataloging room in the evenings on the excuse of collecting crates that did not need collecting. It was B who said the first true thing anyone said to me, before even Marguerite, though I did not weigh it at the time the way I should have. It was late in the 3rd week, a Wednesday, raining the way it rains in March, when the year cannot decide what it wants to be. I had stayed past the close, which I was not supposed to do, photographing the smaller drawings, while the light was gone and the lamps did all the work. Octavia had stayed too, at the far end of the table, because Octavia always stayed, and B came in to take a crate, and she stopped in the doorway and looked at the two of us in our 2 pools of lamplight, 20 feet apart and not speaking. And she said, with the terrible directness of the very young, "You two are the quietest, loud thing I have ever seen." I told her I did not know what she meant. B shrugged, hauling her crate. She said, "My Nan was a porter here before me. 40 years. She told me once that Miss Reyne came in every single day and looked at everything in the building like she was waiting for one particular thing to finally arrive in the post. And then she nodded at me, a girl with a chipped cup and a dead grandmother, and a borrowed pool of lamplight, and she said, 'I reckon it came.' And she took her crate and went out into the rain." I did not look at Octavia. I could not. But I heard her set the brass pen down, very softly, and I heard her not say anything, which from Octavia was the loudest possible reply. By the 4th week, I had stopped pretending I was coming in to check dates. I came in because the cataloging room was the only place in the city where I did not feel like I was being slowly subtracted. Everywhere else, my grandmother was leaving me a little more each day. The house emptier, the lawyers patient, the world quietly closing the account of Agnes Rourke. But in that room, under those lamps across that table, she was getting more real, not less, because Octavia was finding the truth of her one object at a time and writing it down. And I had begun to feel that as long as the cataloging was not finished, my grandmother was not finished either. There was a small bronze in the collection that I had never understood. 2 figures, very worn, standing close but not touching, so old and so rubbed by handling that you could no longer tell if they were about to embrace or had just let go. Agnes loved it past all reason. She kept it on her windowsill for 30 years. Other collectors had told her it was nothing, a workshop piece, a casting of a casting. And she had never argued. She had only kept it where the morning light would find it, the way Octavia kept herself where the 4 o'clock light would find her. And I had never asked her why, and now I never could. Octavia catalogued it on a Thursday. I watched her turn it under the lamp for a long time, longer than she gave anything. And at last she said, without my asking, "Your grandmother knew exactly what this was. It is not a workshop piece. It is older than the workshop everyone wanted to give it to. And it is honest, and it is the best thing in the collection. And the trade will undervalue it tomorrow, because the trade has always mistaken worn for worthless. She knew. She kept it on the windowsill because she knew, and she let them be wrong, because being right quietly was enough for her." I asked how she could possibly know that about my grandmother. And Octavia pressed her thumb to the cap of the pen and did not press it again, and said, "Because it is what I would have done. We were the same kind of careful, your grandmother and I. There are not many of us. You are one." That is the first time she told me anything about herself, and she did it by telling me about the dead. And I did not understand until much later that she had just explained her entire life to me in 3 sentences, standing over 2 bronze figures who were either coming together or letting go, and that she had been one of those figures for a very long time, and was telling me, in the only language she trusted, which one she hoped to be. The 2 figures stood close and did not touch. I thought about them all that night. I should tell you about the afternoon the perimeter nearly broke, because it is the truest thing I know about discipline, and because it was her discipline, not mine, that held it. It was warm, suddenly, the way spring turns one afternoon and the whole building forgets how to breathe. We had been working close over the open enamel cabinet for hours, and I was tired in the particular way grief makes you tired, all the way down. And I was an omega in a small warm room standing a handspan from an alpha whose scent I had stopped pretending not to notice weeks ago. And something in me, some wall I had spent my entire adult life building, simply ran out of mortar. I felt it go. I felt the want come up through me like heat coming off a road. And I knew in a flat and frightening way that if she so much as turned toward me, I would not hold the line, that I would close every inch myself and ask her to keep me right there in the cataloging room, conditions and freedom and slow, careful patience all forgotten. She felt it. Of course she felt it. There's no hiding that from an alpha. And I did not have the strength left to try. And Octavia Reyne took one step back. She did it gently. She did it the way you set down something you are afraid to drop. She put 8 inches of warm spring air between us where there had been a handspan, and she turned the steel band on her wrist, counterclockwise, the rare way, the way that meant something had gotten past her too, and she said, very quietly, "Not yet. Not like this. Not because the room is warm and you are tired and your grandmother is gone. When you come to me, you are going to come to me clear-eyed, on a day you have chosen, knowing exactly what I am and choosing it anyway. I will not take you in a weak hour. I would rather wait forever than have you wake up tomorrow and call me one more thing that happened to you. I want you to understand what that cost her. I could smell what it cost her. She wanted that afternoon exactly what I wanted, and she was the one with all the power, and she used every bit of that power to take a single step backward. That is the most anyone has ever loved me. A step back, in a warm room, when both of us wanted her to step forward. I have never gotten over it. I do not intend to. I fell asleep at the table after that, wrung out, the way you sleep after you have nearly drowned and been pulled out. And when I woke, the lamps were low, and the room was empty, and her coat was over my shoulders. The charcoal that was green, heavy and warm and smelling of ink and cedar, draped there at some point by someone who had not woken me and had not stayed to be thanked. She had gone home into the cold March night without it. I sat in the dark wrapped in her coat like a thing finally kept, and I did not take it off for a long time. And I did not say a word about it the next morning. And neither did she. And it went on the same hook as the cup, in the part of us that needed no language. That was the week I stopped being able to imagine the rest of my life without her in it. I just was not brave enough yet to say so. It was Marguerite who said it first. Marguerite, 71, who missed nothing, who had watched the house take and lose 1,000 things and 1,000 people, and had stopped being sentimental about any of it, except, apparently, me. She found me on the stairs one evening near the end of the 4th week. She had 2 cups of tea, which was a Marguerite tactic. The tea, it meant she intended to say something you would want to be holding something warm for. She handed me one, and she looked out over the empty sale room, and she said, "You know she's not cataloging the collection, Nell." I said, "Of course she is. It is her job." And Marguerite said, "No, dear. She has people for the collection. She is cataloging you. She has been cataloging you since the morning you came up those stairs with a broken cup you would not put down. 40 years I have watched that woman decide that almost nothing is worth her full attention. And then you walked in. So before you go and lose everything you have to a room full of strangers, you might ask yourself whether the most careful person in this building has been quietly making sure you are the one thing that does not get sold." I said, "What are you talking about? Who is she?" And Marguerite, who was the only person who ever told me the truth without making me pay for it first, looked at me for a long moment, and then she decided, I could see her decide it, that this was a thing I had to find on my own. And she patted my hand, and she said only, "Ask her what the R stands for," on the building. And then she took her tea and went down the stairs and left me holding mine. And the sale room in front of me was very large and very dark. And somewhere above me, a woman I had refused to understand was turning out the lamps one by one. Reyne Vass. Ask her what the R stands for. I did not sleep that night either. The 5th week, I asked her what the R stood for. I asked it badly. I had meant to be careful, to come at it sideways. And instead, I walked into the cataloging room at 7:30 in the morning, before the cup had even gone cold, and I said it like an accusation. "Octavia, what does the R stand for?" On the building. She did not pretend not to understand. That was another thing about her. She never made you do the work of her dishonesty, because she did not have any. She set down the pen. She pressed her thumb to the cap of it once, and then she did not press it again, which I had learned meant she had decided to say the thing after all. "Reyne," she said. "It stands for rain. My great-grandmother put it on the building. I would have taken it down, but it is good for the staff to have something to be loyal to that is older than I am." I said, "You own this house." She said, "I own this house." I said, "You have been cataloging my grandmother's bronzes by hand for 5 weeks, and you own this house." And Octavia Reyne, who could have bought the street my grandmother died on, looked at me across a chipped enamel cup and said, "Yes, I have. And I would tell you that it is the most important work I have done in some years, but you are not ready to hear why, and I would rather you sit down than fall." I sat down. Here's what I could not make fit, and what kept me awake that whole 5th week. If she owned the house, she could have done anything. She could have pulled the Rourke Cabinet from the sale with a sentence. She could have written me a number that would have cleared my grandmother's debts and let me keep every bronze and every enamel and the chip cup besides, and it would have cost her less than the chandeliers cost to clean. She had the power to simply make my whole catastrophe disappear. and she had not used it. She had, instead, spent 5 weeks restoring the truth of every piece by hand, and setting a cup of tea at my place, and holding a line she would not cross. And I could not understand why a woman with that much power would choose the slow, careful, restrained version of helping me when she could have had the loud, easy one for free. I understand it now. It took me far too long, and a woman much wiser than me had to nearly lose me before I understood it. But I understand it now, so let me save you the 5 weeks. She did not want to rescue me. Rescue is a thing you do to a person once and then they belong to you a little, in the way the rescued always belong to the rescuer, and she did not want me to belong to her like that. She wanted me to choose her with my eyes open, knowing exactly what she was. The way my grandmother taught me, you do not love a thing properly until you know what it is. The slow version was not her being careful with her money. It was her being careful with my freedom. She was the most powerful person in the building, and she had decided that the one thing she would not do with that power was use it on me. Do you understand how rare that is? I did not then. I do now. I told her once, near the end, that she was the kindest person I had ever met. I meant it as the highest thing I had. She put it down the way you put down a thing that has been handed to you under the wrong name. She said, "I am not kind, Nell. I want you to stop thinking that, because it will make you careless with me, and I do not want you careless. Kind people are soft on the truth. I am not soft on anything. What you keep calling kindness is only this. I cannot stand to watch a true thing be treated as less than it is. It is the one thing in the world I will not tolerate. A worn bronze called worthless. An honest enamel sold by the dozen. A woman who has spent her whole life being exactly right about everything she touched, dying in debt because the world undervalued her the way it undervalues everything quiet. That is not kindness, what I feel about those things. It is closer to rage. I have simply learned to keep it very still." And then she looked at me, and she said the rest of it. The part I carried out of that room and have never set down. She said, "You think I am being gentle with you? I am not being gentle with you. I am refusing, with everything I have, to let one more true thing in my building be undervalued. That is what you are to me. You are not a sad girl I am being nice to. You are the truest thing that has come through those doors in 20 years, and the world has spent your whole life pricing you like a workshop piece, and I will not have it. I will not. So do not call it kindness. Call it what it is. Call it accuracy. I have been loved since. I will be loved again, I hope for a long time, by the same person. But no one has ever told me I was true and meant it as a fact rather than a flattery." And I think that sentence rearranged something structural in me, the way a single correct attribution can change the meaning of an entire collection. She had been the overlooked one too. I want you to know that because she would never have told you herself, and it is the key to all of her. Marguerite gave me the shape of it, in pieces, over those weeks. There had been an older sibling, the loud Reyne, the one the family groomed for the rooms with the chandeliers, the one who could charm a board and close a sale and be photographed. And there had been Octavia, the quiet one, the second one, the one they sent to the back rooms to learn the cataloging, because cataloging was where you put the child who was good with objects and awkward with people. They had undervalued her entire childhood. They had looked at the careful, watchful, exact little girl and seen a clerk, the way the trade looked at a worn bronze and saw a casting of a casting. And then, in the way these stories go, the loud one had run the house onto the rocks within a decade of inheriting it, and the quiet one had quietly bought back the debt and the name and the building, and had chosen, when it was all hers, not to announce a single bit of it. She kept cataloging. She kept to the back room. She let the house go on calling her staff, because the people who mistake the quiet one for the clerk tell you everything you need to know about them, and she preferred to know. So when a woman climbed her staircase carrying a chipped cup she would not put down, a woman whose grandmother had spent 40 years being right and undervalued and had died for it, Octavia Reyne did not see a stranger. She saw the thing she had spent her whole life being, and she decided in the first 10 seconds, the way she decided everything, completely and without fuss, that this one was not going to be undervalued. Not in her building, not while she had a single say in it. I did not know any of that yet, the day she stepped back from me in the warm room. I only knew that the most exact person I had ever met kept choosing, over and over, the slow, careful version of keeping me. I know the rest now. The slow version was not patience for its own sake. It was a woman who had been priced wrong her whole life, refusing on principle to price me wrong by rushing. What happened next was very small. It was a Friday, late, the 4 o'clock light, the coke gone green. We were leaning over the open enamel cabinet, lot 114, checking a panel against the catalog, and our hands were near each other on the shelf, and my grandmother's brass key was in my pocket, as it always was. And Octavia reached to steady the panel, and her hand came to rest a half-inch from mine, and stopped. Just stopped. She did not move it the last half-inch. I felt the warmth of it across that half-inch the way you feel the sun through a window in winter. All the heat, and none of the touch. And I understood that the half-inch was on purpose. That she was holding the perimeter even here, even now, even with her own hand. And I wanted, with an intensity that frightened me, for her to close it. She did not close it. She said, quietly, looking at the panel and not at me, "There is a key to this cabinet that is not in the lot. It is the maker's key. Your grandmother had it made in a pair 80 years ago, and she kept one, and she gave the other to a buyer she trusted a long time ago, before you were born. The lot cannot be complete without both. So when the cabinet sells, I am going to instruct the house to hold it back from final settlement until both keys are present. Hold it back. Do you understand what I am telling you?" I said I did not. She closed the cabinet. She turned the steel band on her wrist, counterclockwise, the rare way, the once, and she said, "You will." And then she said my name. Just my name, Nell, the way she almost never said it, like a thing set carefully on a shelf. And she left, and I stood alone in the 4 o'clock light holding a brass key whose twin had been in this building the whole time. I found out the rest from Marguerite, because Octavia would not tell me herself, because Octavia had decided I had to be able to bear it before she would let me know it, and Marguerite decided I had borne enough. My grandmother knew her. Agnes Rourke, who bought overlooked things on a teacher's pension for 40 years, had sold and traded through Reyne Vass for most of those years, quietly, in the small, honest amounts that the great houses barely bothered to record. And there had been exactly one buyer in all that time who never tried to cheat her, who paid what a thing was worth and not what grief or ignorance would have let them get away with, who valued the overlooked enamel because it was honest and not because it was cheap. That buyer was Octavia Reyne. They had known each other for 20 years. My grandmother had given Octavia the maker's key to the cabinet a decade ago, not as a sale, as a trust, the way you hand a thing to the one person you are certain will understand it. And when Agnes got her diagnosis, before she ever told me how bad it was, she had come to this building one last time, and she had sat with Octavia in the cataloging room, and she had asked her 2 things. Make sure the collection leaves knowing what it was, and make sure the girl is not alone. A thing should leave knowing what it was. She had said my grandmother sentenced to me in the first week, and let me think it was about a bronze. The sale was 8 days away when Cressida Marlow found her lever. I will tell you what she did, because it is the crisis, and because what we chose to do about it is the whole measure of us. Cressida learned what I had just learned, that Octavia owned the house, and she understood at once what it meant. She wrote to the board, and she copied the trade press, and she said that Reyne Vass could not be trusted to conduct an honest sale of the Rourke Cabinet, because the house's own principal had a personal interest in the lot and in the grieving young woman attached to it, and that the only fair thing was for the house to recuse itself, to strip every protection from the cabinet, To let it go to the open floor with no reserve and no integrity clause and no holding back, where money, real money, her money, could take it apart in peace. She was not wrong that there was a personal interest. That was the cruelty of it. She had taken the truest thing in the building and made it sound like corruption. For 3 days, the building shook in a way that buildings are not supposed to shake. The board met twice. The trade press ran the story Cressida had handed them, and they ran it the way the press runs anything, with a photograph of the house looking grand and guilty, and a headline with a question mark in it that did all the accusing while pretending to merely ask. People who had walked past Octavia Reyne for years suddenly had opinions about her. I watched men who could not have named a single object in the collection discuss, gravely, whether the principal of the house had compromised herself over a grieving girl, and I learned, in those 3 days, exactly how cheaply the world will price a true thing once someone has shown them how. And through all of it, Octavia did not raise her voice once. I want you to understand what that was like to watch, because it taught me the last thing I needed to know about her before the end. She sat in the cataloging room while her family's 200-year-old name was turned into a question mark, and she cataloged. She turned a bronze a quarter inch at a time under the lamp. She pressed her thumb to the cap of the pen and decided over and over not to say the things she could have said, the true and devastating things, the things that would have ended Cressida Marlow in a sentence and cost the house nothing. She held them all still. She had told me once that what looked like kindness in her was rage kept very quiet. And now I was watching the quiet, and it was the most frightening and the most steadying thing I had ever seen. And I understood that a person who can hold that much still on purpose is not weak. She is the opposite of weak. She is simply waiting for the one true moment when the stillness will mean more than the noise ever could. B. Conran stopped me on the stairs in the middle of it, white with fury on my behalf, and said the staff were ready to walk out, all of them, that nobody who actually worked in the building believed a word of it, that her nan would have spat on the floor of the press room. And I told her to tell everyone to hold the line and trust Miss Reyne. And B looked at me and said, "You sound like her now." And I realized I did, and that I was glad, and that somewhere in those 9 weeks, I had stopped being a girl things happened to, and started being a woman who held lines on purpose, and that Octavia had done that for me without my noticing, the way she did everything, slowly, exactly, and without taking the credit. That was the night I went to her, not the other way around. I have told this part as if she came to me, because that is how I felt it, but the truth is I went to the cataloging room at the end of the 3rd day and found her still at the table, and I closed the door behind me because I had decided something. And I have learned that you keep a decision by acting on it before the daylight talks you out of it. She did not pretend I had not come to fight. For the first time since I had known her, she looked tired, and she laid it out plainly, the way she laid out everything. She said, "I can fight this and lose the house its name, or I can recuse the house entirely, and the cabinet goes to the open floor with no protection, and Cressida buys it and breaks it, and there is nothing I am permitted to do to stop her, because the moment I act, I prove her right. Those are the 2 doors. I have looked for a 3rd all day. There is no 3rd, and I understood sitting there that she was offering to ruin herself for me, that she would fight it publicly and let her family's 200-year-old name be dragged through the trade press as the house that rigs its sails, if I asked her to. She would take the whole cost onto herself. She had spent 5 weeks refusing to use her power on me, and now she was offering to burn it all down on my behalf, and all I had to do was let her. I want to say something first. The easiest thing I have ever almost done was to let her. I sat in that room, and I felt how simple it would be to say yes, save it, save me, pay for it with your name and not mine. And I thought about a woman who taught me that you do not love a thing properly until you know what it is. And I thought about a half-inch of warmth that she would not close because she would not take my freedom even with her own hand. And I understood that if I let her burn for me, I would be doing to her exactly what Cressida accused her of. I would be letting her rig the thing. I would be taking her honesty, the one thing she had never once spent, and spending it. So I said no. I said, recuse the house, all the way, hold nothing back. She went very still. She said, Nell, if I recuse the house, the cabinet goes to the open floor and she will buy it and there is nothing. And I said, let it go to the open floor, no reserve, no clause, no protection. Honest and whole the way it always should have been in front of everyone. And then let me bid. She said, you cannot outbid Cressida Marlow. I said, I know, but I would rather lose my grandmother honestly than keep her by letting you become the thing that woman says you are. You taught me that. You have been teaching me that for 5 weeks with a cup of tea. So we do it clean. We put it in front of the whole room with nothing hidden. And whatever happens, happens where everyone can see it, and no one can ever say the house cheated. That is my third door. It cost me the cabinet, probably. It does not cost you your name. And Octavia Reyne looked at me for a long, long time. And then she did something I had never seen her do. She smiled, fully, the way the rest of her face had been keeping in reserve for 38 years. And she said very quietly, there she is. I did not understand what she meant. I was about to. The morning of the sale, the cup was at my place, washed in full. I want you to hold that image because it was the last ordinary thing. The cataloging room, 7:30, the chipped enamel cup full of tea, the brass pen on the table, the steel band on her wrist, the coat that was charcoal now and would be green by the time everything was decided. Octavia did not say much. She pressed her thumb to the cap of the pen once and did not press it again, and she said, whatever happens on that floor today, it happens in the open. No one will ever be able to say a word against it. You did that. Remember that you did that. And then she said, sit in the 3rd row on the aisle where I can find you. I did not ask why she needed to find me. I should have asked why she needed to find me. There were 200 people under the chandeliers of Reyne Vass by 11 o'clock, and the house had recused itself in writing. And the trade press was there because Cressida Marlow had made sure the trade press was there, expecting to watch a powerful house get caught with its hand on the scale. What they were going to watch instead was something none of them had a category for. Lot 114 came up just after noon. The auctioneer read the description, the honest one, every attribution true, and every flaw recorded, exactly the way I had asked, the way my grandmother would have wanted. The Rourke Cabinet leaving the world knowing precisely what it was. And then the bidding opened, and I raised my paddle first, with my small number, the whole of what I had, every coin I could put my hands on. And for one beautiful second, it was mine. Then Cressida Marlow raised hers, and doubled it without looking at me. And the room made the small sound a room makes when it remembers that love does not hold its value. I raised mine again. She crushed it again. I went one more time, past the edge of what I had, into money I did not possess, and would have spent the rest of my life paying for. And she covered it like a hand closing over a candle, bored, certain, already turning to the dealer beside her to talk about which panels would go north. The auctioneer looked at me. I had nothing left. I had reached the bottom of myself in front of 200 strangers, and it had not been enough. And I lowered my paddle, and I felt the cabinet begin to leave me. And then the cataloguer stood up. She raised the paddle herself. I have already told you about this. I told you about it at the very beginning, because I have never been able to start the story anywhere else. Octavia Reyne, whom 200 people had spent the morning not looking at, rose from her seat at the side of the room where the staff sit, and she raised a paddle, and she looked at the auctioneer, and the whole room turned to find out who in the world had the nerve, and she said one word, noted. She was not bidding as the house. The house had recused itself, and everyone had the letter to prove it. She was bidding as a private person, in the open, in plain sight, the way anyone in that room was free to do, which is the one thing a person who rigs a sale can never afford to be. She had taken Cressida's accusation and turned it inside out by simply standing up in the light. And she bid. And Cressida, recovering, bid back. And Octavia bid again, calm, unhurried. the economy of a woman who has already been everywhere in the room, and it became very clear, very fast, that there was no number Cressida Marlow could reach that Octavia Reyne was not willing to walk past, because one of them was buying an asset and the other was keeping a promise, and an asset has a ceiling and a promise does not. The gavel came down. Lot 114 to the woman at the side of the room, and 200 people sat in the oldest auction house in the city and understood all at once that the quietest person in the building had owned it the whole time and had stood up in front of everyone to keep a grieving girl's grandmother whole. And there was not one thing in the trade press the next morning about a rigged sale, because you cannot rig a thing you do in the open with the whole world watching. She had bid on the cabinet. Everyone in that room knew she had bid on me. She found me in the cataloging room afterward, away from all of it. And that is where it happened. The thing I had held the perimeter against for 9 weeks. The half-inch I had wanted her to close since a Friday in the 4 o'clock light. She came in, and she set the catalog down. She crossed the room with that economy of her, no wasted step, and she stopped in front of me closer than she had ever stood. And for once, she did not turn the band on her wrist. And she did not press her thumb to anything. She just looked at me, and then she lifted her hand, slowly, giving me every chance to step back, and she rested it against my jaw. It was the first time she had ever touched me. 9 weeks. And the first time, I did not step back. Her hand at my jaw, warm, careful, and her scent close now, ink and cedar, and the thing underneath that was only her. And she said very quietly, "I have been keeping you since the morning you came up those stairs with a broken cup you would not put down. I did it slowly because I wanted you to be able to leave. You stayed. So I am going to say it once, in plain words, the way you deserve. You are not a thing I rescued. You are the one I chose, with my eyes open, knowing exactly what you are. And I would like to be chosen back." Her forehead rested against mine. She kissed me once, and it was the quietest and most certain thing that had ever happened to me. And then she reached into her coat and took out a small brass key, dark with 80 years of handling, the twin of the one that had been in my pocket since the hospital. And she pressed it into my hand and folded my fingers over it the way my grandmother had, without a word, and the 2 keys lay together in my palm, the pair complete for the first time in a decade. And I understood finally what she had meant. Hold it back. She had instructed the house to hold the cabinet back from final settlement until both keys were present. Both keys were present now. The lot was complete. It was never going to leave. It had been waiting the whole time for me to bring it the other half of itself. I said, "Noted." She laughed, the full laugh, the one she kept in reserve. And she said my name, Nell, like a thing set carefully and forever on a shelf where it belonged. It is 2 years later, and I want to tell you a small ordinary thing. Because the small ordinary things are the ones that turn out to be the whole point. We did not break up the Rourke Cabinet. It sits in the room where Octavia and I have breakfast, and the chipped enamel cup sits on the shelf beside it, washed where I can see it. And most mornings, she is at the table before me with my tea already poured. Because in all the time I have known her, I have never once arrived at a room before her, and I have stopped trying. The 2 brass keys hang on a single ring by the door. The collection left the world knowing what it was, and then it did not leave at all. And both of those are true at once. The way the best things always were with the woman who taught me how to love them. The small bronze, the 2 worn figures who stood close and did not touch, sits on the windowsill in our bedroom, where the morning light finds it, the way Agnes kept it for 30 years. I look at it most days. For my whole life, I could not tell whether the 2 of them were coming together or letting go. And Octavia could not tell either, the day she cataloged it. And neither of us has ever said so out loud. But we both know now which one it was. It was coming together. It was always coming together. They were just doing it slowly, the way the true things do, the way we did. An inch a year across 80 years of being called worthless by people who never bothered to look. I keep it in the light. I will keep it in the light for the rest of my life, and so will she, because we are the same kind of careful, and there are not many of us. And we found each other in a back room in the oldest house in the city, over a chipped cup neither of us would put down. People ask sometimes how it lasted. They want the dramatic answer, the love at first sight answer, and I do not give it to them because it is not true, and because my grandmother taught me what you owe to a thing that is true. It did not last because it was fated. It lasted because a woman with enough power to take anything decided the one thing she would never take from me was the choosing. And she held that line for 9 weeks with a cup of tea. And I chose her, and I keep choosing her. And the choosing has become the kind of thing you would sign in blood if anyone still asked you to. She still presses her thumb to the cap of the pen when she decides not to say a thing. She still turns the steel band when she is holding something still. The coat is still charcoal in the morning and green by 4. And every so often, when I have done something brave or honest or simply mine, she looks at me across whatever room we are in. And she does not say I love you, because she thinks the words have been handled too much by careless people to mean anything anymore. And instead she says the word she said to the auctioneer, the word she said the first morning I climbed the stairs, the smallest and now the largest word I know, noted.